Imagine building like the most impenetrable bank vault on Earth. The steel is 3 feet thick. The biometric locks are absolutely flawless. The alarm systems are wired directly to the authorities with, triple redundancy.
Right, a mechanical masterpiece.
Exactly. Structurally, it is a masterpiece of security. But the money inside, it was actually stolen from the very citizens you're supposed to be protecting.
Wow. Yeah, that's a brilliant way to frame it.
Right. And today, we are really looking at a fatal flaw in modern technology management. It's this incredibly dangerous assumption that a secure system is automatically a good system.
And it's a blind spot that is literally costing companies billions, not to mention doing, real damage to users.
Mhm.
Because historically, we've kind of treated a data breach and an ethically compromised algorithm as well as two completely different problems.
Handled by completely different departments,
Yeah,
usually.
exactly. But the source material we are diving into today forces us to look at them as the exact same systemic failure.
Yeah, so if you are making decisions about data, whether you're a founder, an engineer, or just someone deeply invested in how your digital footprint is leveraged, you really need to understand this collision. We are unpacking a presentation by Mohammed Abubakar. It's titled Information Risk Management in Information Ethics, and it's dated April 26, 2026.
And what makes this stack unique is how it bridges two worlds that are almost always siloed. It's fascinating.
It really is, because the bibliography he uses to make his argument has so much friction. On one side, we have international technical standards, like the heavy, rigid rulebooks of IT security. And sitting right next to them, we have these deep, complex philosophical texts on human ethics.
It's like putting a philosopher and a compliance auditor in an escape room
Yes.
and telling them they have to speak the same language to get out.
And that tension is perfectly captured in the one visual asset included in this stack. It's this deceptively simple image. You've got a bright yellow paper speech bubble with a cutout of a question mark.
Overlapping a blue speech bubble with an exclamation point. And it represents exactly what you just described, the constant ambiguous questioning of human ethics overlapping with the, declarative, definitive solutions we crave in risk management. Abubakar's research is essentially a roadmap for how to survive in that overlapping space.
Okay, let's unpack this, because on the surface, mashing these disciplines together sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare. I mean, let's look at the risk management side first. Abubakar relies heavily on the ISO IEC 27005 standard from 2018.
It's a classic.
Yeah. And for anyone who hasn't had to sit through a compliance audit, when we talk about this ISO standard, we aren't talking about a vague set of corporate values.
No, not at all.
We are talking about a literal mathematical matrix. An IT team assigns a numerical value to a threat, say, a 4 out of 5 for a distributed denial of service attack, and they multiply it by the vulnerability score of their server infrastructure to get a hard risk rating. It is cold mechanical math.
Precisely. And it's designed to be quantifiable so you can allocate budget against it. The ISO standard gives you a framework to calculate the probability of, say, an unauthorized party accessing your database.
Right.
But then, Abubakar brings in Luciano Floridi's book, The Ethics of Information.
Yeah.
And Floridi just completely shatters that purely mechanical worldview.
Oh, totally.
What's fascinating here is that Floridi argues information isn't just a physical resource we use, like oil or coal. It fundamentally shapes our environment. He actually calls it the infosphere.
The infosphere. I love that term.
Yeah, according to Floridi, altering information alters human reality. So when you synthesize that ISO standard with Floridi's philosophy, you realize that traditional risk management is it's fundamentally incomplete.
Right, because if information risk management is building a strong vault with a heavy lock to keep data safe, information ethics is asking whether we even have the right to lock that data away or who gets the key. The math only measures the container, not the consequence of what's inside.
Exactly. You can have a perfectly secure system that operates perfectly unethically. Imagine a beautifully engineered algorithm that processes mortgage applications, right?
Okay.
It uses machine learning to assess creditworthiness based on thousands of data points. The data is encrypted. The servers are patched against all known vulnerabilities. The ISO 27005 matrix is completely green.
Doing everything right mechanically.
Right. But the training data it learned from contains decades of historical redlining. So the system is highly secure, but it is systematically denying marginalized communities access to capital.
Oh, wow. Okay, but I have to push back on this from a practical standpoint. If I am a compliance officer at a fintech startup, my job is to keep the company out of legal trouble and protect the data, period. If I try to halt a major product launch because of an abstract philosophical debate about Flority's infosphere or some historical bias that isn't explicitly illegal yet, I am going to get laughed out of the room or fired. Doesn't combining these just create a massive headache for companies who just want a simple checklist? How does Abubakar expect a mid-level manager to actually weigh high-level Oxford philosophy against a quarterly earnings report?
That is the crux of the entire presentation. And Adubakar's answer is actually entirely pragmatic. The ethical failure inevitably becomes the business failure. It is just a matter of timeline.
Okay, walk me through that.
Well, if you launch that biased mortgage algorithm because the math says the servers are secure, what happens a year later?
I mean, journalists uncover the bias.
Exactly. Journalists uncover the bias, regulators launch an investigation, class action lawsuits are filed. The brand reputation is obliterated. The company loses 10 times the money it made. Abubakar is arguing that blending ethics with risk management isn't some academic exercise to make a compliance officer's life harder. It's a necessary evolution to prevent catastrophic, systemic failures that traditional IT checklists are completely blind to. Ethical risk is financial risk.
Ah, I see. So ethical risk management without a standard like ISO is like a car with a moral compass but no brakes. You know where you should go, but you have no mechanical way to stop yourself from crashing.
Right.
But on the flip side, ISO without ethics is a heavily armored tank driving blindfolded into a crowd.
That is a very visceral way to put it, but it perfectly captures the stakes of the source material.
Which brings us to the actual threats. If a secure vault isn't enough because the system inside might be corrupt, what exactly is the corruption we are looking for? Because when Abubakar outlines the ethical principles we need to manage, he doesn't just list them equally.
No, he doesn't.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Out of all the major types of information risks, he elevates one specific vulnerability above all others: privacy. It's positioned as the absolute center of gravity for digital ethics. And honestly, this surprised me.
Oh, really? Why?
Well, in a landscape filled with algorithmic bias, deep fakes, autonomous weapons, and massive misinformation campaigns, why is privacy the ultimate linchpin?
To understand why privacy is the hub that all the other spokes connect to, we have to look at the 2013 OECD Privacy Framework cited in the bibliography.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, right?
Exactly. They established over a decade ago that we have to fundamentally reframe how we define privacy. We have to move completely past the old "I have nothing to hide" fallacy.
Right, because when people hear privacy risk, they usually just think about someone reading their personal emails or leaking their search history. It feels like an issue of mere embarrassment.
And that is a dangerously narrow view. The OECD framework, combined with the ethical texts here, frames privacy not as the act of keeping a secret, but as the foundation of human autonomy. Yes. Every single time you interact with a digital system, every click, every location ping, every biometric login, every fractional pause as you scroll past a video, you leave a trace. Data brokers and algorithms aggregate those millions of traces to construct a highly accurate digital avatar of you.
That's slightly terrifying.
It is,
Yeah.
because it predicts your emotional triggers, your financial anxieties, your health status, your political leanings.
And if a third party has unrestricted access to that digital avatar, they essentially have a lever to manipulate the real you. I mean, they can dial up your anxiety with targeted news feeds. They can exploit your financial vulnerability with specific ad placements at specific times of day. Without privacy, you don't just lose secrets, you lose your agency.
That is exactly the mechanism. Privacy is the boundary that protects your autonomy. And that is why Abubakar positions it as the central ethical issue in risk management. Think about it. If an organization fails to protect privacy, they destroy the fundamental trust mechanism of the entire system.
Because you can't trust a system that's manipulating you.
Precisely. All other ethical principles, fairness, transparency, accountability, they completely unravel if the system is secretly stripping users of their autonomy. You can't have a fair algorithm if it's built on a foundation of non-consensual surveillance. Privacy is the prerequisite for all other digital ethics.
Okay, so if privacy is the core vulnerability, the immediate operational question is who is on the hook for securing it? Who is actually responsible?
Right.
And Abubakar's outline is incredibly specific here. In his risk mitigation strategies section, he doesn't just assign this to a generic company bucket. He draws a hard line between the role of organizations and the role of information professionals.
Yes, he does.
To me, this dynamic is fascinating. It's a difference between the hospital's administrative board and the individual surgeon standing over the patient.
I like that analogy.
The hospital sets the budget and the safety protocols. But the surgeon is bound by an independent professional oath to do no harm, regardless of what the hospital administrator says. Why is this distinction so crucial in the source material?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the division is structural, and you can see it clearly in the differing nature of the sources Abubakar uses for each role. For the organization's role, he points back to international standards, specifically ISO/IEC 27001.2022.
Okay, another ISO standard.
Right. And this standard is all about establishing an information security management system, or an ISMS. This is the macro architecture. The organizations are responsible for building the hospital. They allocate the budget, they establish the overarching data governance policies, they set up the encryption pipelines, and they create the legal compliance departments.
They build the massive systemic machine.
Exactly. But an organization is an abstract legal entity. It doesn't actually write the Python scripts. It doesn't configure the AWS buckets. Human beings do. And that is where Abubakar brings in the role of information professionals, referencing Deborah G. Johnson's Computer Ethics and the 2018 ACM Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct.
Which is a crucial distinction. The 2018 update to the ACM code was a major paradigm shift. I mean, it wasn't just about don't steal code. It explicitly stated that technologists have a moral imperative to consider the broader societal impact of their work.
Yes, it shifted the burden of moral responsibility directly onto the shoulders of the individual engineer or data scientist. Johnson's work on computer ethics reinforces this beautifully. Her argument is that an organization can have a flawless ISO 2701 certification, but is the individual professional working in the trenches who is actually going to spot the ethical landmine.
Let's walk through how that actually happens, because in a corporate environment, the pressure to ship a product usually outweighs the pressure to philosophize.
This is a bit true.
Say a product manager tells a lead engineer to integrate a new third-party SDK into their app to track user engagement. The legal team signs off because the terms of service technically cover it. The security team signs off because the data transfer is encrypted. The organization has cleared it.
The ISO boxes are checked.
Right. But the engineer realizes this SDK is aggressively scraping background location data that has absolutely nothing to do with the app's core function. What does the ACM code actually do for that engineer in that moment?
It acts as both a mandate and a professional shield. Without the professional code, that engineer is just a disgruntled employee complaining to their boss. They are easily dismissed. But with the ACM code, that engineer is a recognized professional upholding an industry standard.
Oh, I see.
The code gives them the vocabulary and the authority to say, I know legal approved this, but my professional ethics, which govern my status as a technologist, dictate that this violates user autonomy and I cannot build it. Organizations provide the macro-level structure, but individual professionals act as the micro-level conscience.
So they need each other.
Absolutely. The system only works if both roles are actively engaged. If the organization doesn't empower the professional to speak up, the risk management fails. If the professional just blindly follows orders without questioning the ethics, the risk management fails.
It is an incredible amount of pressure on the individual worker, though. I mean, they are basically acting as the emergency brake on a multi-billion-dollar machine.
They really are.
Which naturally leads us to the final analytical stage of Abubakar's presentation, the collision of challenges and benefits. We have these robust codes, we have the mathematical ISO frameworks, we have the philosophical grounding, yet tech companies still stumble into massive ethical crises every single week.
Every week.
I want to bring back that visual we talked about at the beginning.
Yes.
The yellow paper speech bubble with the question mark, overlapping the blue speech bubble with the exclamation point. So what does this all mean? Does this image represent the tension of this entire presentation? The question mark representing the challenges, like the constant questioning of what is ethical, while the exclamation point represents the benefits, the sort of aha moment of a secure, ethically sound system.
That is a perfect interpretation of it. And it aligns beautifully with the work of Herman Tavani, another key author in the bibliography. His book, Ethics and Technology, focuses heavily on what he calls controversies and questions. The yellow question mark represents the profound structural challenges we face, and the core challenge is a massive discrepancy in speed.
The pacing problem.
Exactly. Technology scales globally at the speed of light. An engineering team can deploy a new facial recognition algorithm or a generative AI model to 100 million users over a weekend.
Right.
But ethical consensus, that moves at the speed of human deliberation. It is slow, messy, and deeply subjective.
We are seeing this right now. Companies deployed vast biometric scraping tools years before any government even knew how to define the legal boundaries of a face scan, let alone regulate it. The technology had already evolved 3 generations by the time the first draft of an ethical framework was written.
And that lag is a nightmare for risk management. I mean, how do you quantify and manage a risk using an ISO standard when society hasn't even agreed on what the risk is yet?
You can't.
No, you can't. It forces information professionals to constantly live inside that yellow question mark. They are forced to take old ethical paradigms rules written for the era of filing cabinets and desktop computers and desperately try to apply them to entirely new paradigms like quantum computing or autonomous AI agents. It requires relentless vigilance, and frankly, it is exhausting.
So if the yellow question mark represents this exhausting uphill battle against the speed of technology, what is the blue exclamation point? What is the profound benefit that justifies all this friction? If I'm a CEO, why should I encourage my engineers to slow down product development to debate Florida and the ACM data?
The blue exclamation point is resilience. If we synthesize all these sources, the ultimate argument is that doing the ethical thing is the only way to ensure long-term sustainability. When a company bakes these ethical considerations into its risk matrix from day one, when it fiercely protects privacy as autonomy, when it empowers its professionals to use the ACM code as a shield, when it treats data not just as a resource but as an extension of human lives, it builds genuine trust.
And trust is the ultimate competitive advantage. You can copy a competitor's feature set in a month, but you cannot copy their user trust.
Exactly. It is the only currency that prevents catastrophic failure in the long run. Users will abandon a platform they do not trust no matter how flawless the UI is. Regulators will eventually dismantle a company that acts recklessly with societal data. The exclamation point is the realization that an ethically sound system is the most resilient system you can build. It doesn't just survive the immediate threat of a hacker. It thrives because it's fundamentally aligned with the human values of the people it serves.
That is a brilliant synthesis of Abubakar's framework. It really shows how this presentation dismantles our traditional siloed thinking. I mean, we started by breaking down the math of ISO standards and colliding it with the philosophy of the infosphere, proving that a secure system can still be systematically corrupt.
Right.
We recognized privacy not just as hiding secrets, but as the foundational defense of human autonomy. We looked at the mechanics of mitigation, contrasting the macro architecture of organizations with the micro-level conscience of individual professionals armed with the ACM code.
Exactly.
And finally, we weighed the exhausting challenge of the pacing problem against the undeniable benefit of building resilient, trusted systems. This deep dive really puts everything into perspective.
It is a phenomenal stack of sources because it refuses to let us take the easy way out. And if I could leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over something that is simmering just beneath the surface of Abubakar's bibliography, it is this. We are looking at a future where systems are becoming increasingly automated. AI is taking over more and more of the risk management pipeline itself.
Oh, sure.
As that happens, there will be an immense temptation to try and automate our ethics, to turn the deep philosophical questions of Florida and Johnson into just another machine-readable checklist.
Yeah.
And if we do that, if we try to mathematically quantify human morality the exact same way we quantify firewall strength, do we risk permanently losing the subjective, messy human judgment that these authors argue is the only thing keeping technology tethered to our humanity?
Wow. That is the ultimate yellow question mark. Because you can calculate the exact probability of a server breach, but you cannot write an algorithm that truly understands what it means to lose your autonomy. And if we ever forget the difference, the systems we build to protect us might just be the very things that lock us in. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep interrogating the tools you use, keep fiercely protecting your digital footprint, and as always, keep asking the big questions.